a warm welcome to you too.
Thank you.
I, Anuradha Sharda, thank all of you for watching our videos, for for writing in your suggestions, and for writing in your comments. It helps us bring up more and more videos. So we are back with James on popular demand. James has given us an insight into the economics and the spirituality of this pandemic in one of his videos. And if you haven't watched it, please do watch it. It'll give you a lot of material to think over, to chew on. So, what are we going to learn from you in this video, James?
Just a little bit, a teeny bit.
Okay.
So, first I'm going to talk about Ayurveda in the chart, the Kapha, Pitta, Vata, a little bit how to see in the horoscope, and then I also want to speak about the Bhav chart.
Right.
When I was in Sedona in November of last year, 2019, I gave a workshop. It was a workshop for 4 hours and a 2-hour lecture. And it was basically all about what I wished I had known 40 years ago, the things that took me decades to learn. I wanted to teach them. Simple things, but things that took a long time.
So that's all your experience in so many tight, small points that you wanted to give out to people. And do you still have those lectures with you, James? And people would like to buy
yes, I do. I have the 4-hour workshop with the 10 pages or 8 pages of charts. I can email that to people. It's $55, and then you get the 4 hours. And then there's a 2-hour lecture, which is $35. But they're little distinctions, things that, you know, it took me so long to find out, to really understand that Jupiter and Mercury, if they get too close, they cause all kinds of problems that otherwise they don't. It's when they get very close, or that Saturn never, even when it's exalted, it's never as good as it should be. And on the other hand, Jupiter, when it's fallen, is never as bad as it should be. And then things like the 8th house, which represents sex in the Western system, it's not sex in the Hindu system. But my experience has shown me that when the 8th house is very strong in the Hindu chart, there's not just a sexy appearance, but there's strong sexual energy. Things like that took me a long time to understand. You know, things that you learn from experience, like I learned that too many children that have very strong 8th houses would be assaulted by sexual predators only because they're 8th. If they had Jupiter or Venus in the 8th house, then you know they'd have sexy appearance. They would be more vulnerable to being assaulted. So when I'm doing a horoscope, you know, if it's for a child, I tell the mother, you have to be careful with this child. There's a sexy energy there. Just things that took decades to learn, you know, and they're just in distinctions. They're just lots of little distinctions. Anyway, when I was teaching that, one thing surprised me. That was that too many people did not know about the Bhava chart. The Bhava chart is where if the ascendant is 1 or 2 degrees of Pisces, in the regular ancient system, if Pisces is 1 or 2 degrees and Venus is 28 degrees, Venus is in the 1st house. But that system is a little bit odd because the ascendant can be 25 degrees away from a planet and still be in the house. So the newer system, which I suspect came from the Greeks or the invading cultures, they said, listen, you have to use a house system that's a little bit more fair. You know, a planet's far from the ascendant, read it in the next house. So when I was in India, the way it worked for me was one day I'd be looking at a horoscope and Santana, my first teacher, would say, oh, look, Jupiter's in the 10th house. He's going to have a great career, maybe a spiritual career. I said, yeah. And a week later, we'd look at the same chart and he'd say, oh, yeah, Jupiter's in the 9th house. He's going to travel a lot. And I'd say, but Jupiter's in the 10th house. He'd go, but still. I said, what do you mean, but still? What does this mean? He never explained it, but I came to find out that he was using the Bhava chart, where because the degree of Jupiter was so far from the ascendant degree that you would read it in both the 9th and the 10th. But Many astrologers just read it the ancient way, or they just read it the new way, either the 9th or the 10th. That won't work. You need to do both. So we'll look at Donald Trump's chart, not because of him, but just as a chart that's really easy to see planets that jump into different houses. So I'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about Ayurveda. Now, I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner, but it's a part of astrology. It's a part where and this was something that took me a while. Neither Santanam nor Padya ever said, oh, look, he's very Pitta, he's very Kapha. That never happened. But as the years went by, I'd go to conferences and I would, learn about them. And then I found that there are certain planets that relate. So there's 3 health mannerisms, I guess you could say. The Ayurvedic practitioner takes your pulse, and they find out whether you have more Pitta, Vata, or Kapha. So what are these terms? All your Indian viewers know.
Yes, most of them know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pitta, I have a lot of Pitta. Pitta is very fiery.
Right.
They have a lot of ideas. They're very impulsive. They have leadership energy, but they can get angry and they can be fiery. And there's too much heat in the body. So,
but they're also very instinctive. They're also very instinctive.
That makes sense too. Yeah. And so I have too much fire in the body. So for me to have caffeine, no good. It's too stimulating. Alcohol, hot spices, garlic, no good, because it fires me up. Now, what would be good for Pitta would be tofu and a non-alcoholic beer, watermelon, cantaloupes. They cool you down. But so we want to know, where do you find Pitta in the horoscope? The planets are the fiery planets. The Sun and Mars are Pitta. Then we have, and I'll come back to how you see it in the chart. So then you have Kapha. Kapha people, they're very slow. They're lethargic. They're lazy. They love to sleep. They gain weight and then can't take it off. However, once they get going, they may be lazy, lethargic. Once they get going, oh my God, they keep going and going and going and going. I had a handyman decades ago, very Kapha, and I'd expect him at 8 or 9 in the morning. There was no way he's going to come at 8 or he's sleeping. He'd come at 1 o'clock. He would stay until midnight. I still have memories of a handyman coming to my house, building a room on our house, and building at 10, 11 o'clock at night. It was Kapha. So they're very slow and steady and lethargic. So the Kapha planets are Moon and Jupiter. The Moon, it's emotional, and Moon is Kapha. Jupiter is also Kapha, slow and lethargic and like that. And the Kapha people can drink all the coffee they want. They can have stimulants, but what they should not have is oily foods and rich foods and foods that slow them down like that. So they could have cold foods. It wouldn't be so bad for them. Then you have Vata. Vata are the people, and we all have some Pitta, some Vata, some Kapha. So I am what you would call Pitta Vata. I have most Pitta, then a little, then more Vata, and very little Kapha. It's not like I have none. If I had no Kapha, I wouldn't be able to sit and write a book every day, sitting in a room writing every day for a year. You need some Kapha for that. Anyway, Kapha, the Vata, is intellectual, very mental, very intellectual, mental, nervous, but they're very good with intelligence and things like that. So the Vata would be Mercury, obviously. A Mercury person, they're spaced out, they're running all over, they're nervous, they're jittery, the nervous system is delicate. And Saturn, I remember particularly being surprised. I thought, Saturn is Vata? But I tell you what, you find someone with Saturn in the first house near the ascendant, and they're often very wiry. They're thin, they're wiry, they're nervous, they're like that. So those people should not eat cold foods. They should eat warm foods that settle them down. The worst thing for them to do is to eat fast and run. They need to slow down. They need to eat warm foods like that. So now I said that Vata is Saturn and Mercury, which is for sure. Venus is Kapha, but Venus can be Vata because they say this is the reason. Venus rules Libra. Venus rules Taurus. You could see why that would be Kapha. Taurus is slow and steady, but Libra, very intellectual, airy. So Venus can go either way, like that. So how do you see these in a horoscope? The easiest way to see them is near the ascendant, just without other aspects. Let's just say nothing is aspecting Mars and it's in the first house. And the closer it gets to the ascendant, the stronger the Pitta will be.
Yeah.
But you could also have the ascendant ruler. Maybe it's a Libra ascendant or a Taurus ascendant. Venus rules the ascendant, and Venus is 2 or 3 degrees or 4 or 5 degrees away from Mars or the Sun, which are hot, fiery Pitta planets, like that. So you have the ascendant. Now you could also have a planet in the 7th house aspecting the ascendant, but it has to be tight. So let's say that Jupiter is in 7 degrees of Capricorn, and let's say you have a 3, 4, 9, or 10 degree Cancer ascendant. That Jupiter aspect's pretty strong. That's going to give the Kapha influence. But you could also have, so mainly you want to look at planets in the first, particularly planets aspecting, if it's aspecting the ascendant tightly, and planets conjunct the ascendant ruler. Okay, that's mostly. Then there's also a situation, astrology is a psychic kind of thing. You have to, my astrologer, Pita, used to say I would try to isolate something. And he'd say, James, he said, chai is not just, one element. Chai is a bunch of herbs, all delicately balanced. That's the way astrology is.
Yes.
That takes decades. But so sometimes it won't be the planet aspecting the ascendant or the ascendant ruler. It'll simply be some aspect in the chart. The moon is 2 degrees away from Saturn. And the moon, it represents you. So that Saturn influence is going to be stronger than the moon. It's going to, moon hitting Saturn means nothing unless Saturn's the ascendant ruler. But if it's just, you don't have neither Saturn nor moon ascendant, the moon being hit by Saturn tightly is going to be very, very Vata. Or the sun. So if the sun is, conjunct, say, Mercury, tightly Mercury, the sun is the soul, the Atmakaraka, the soul, but it has to be tight, So if the sun or the moon have this kind of aspect, it can really, give a strong Vata, Kapha influence. And you can go online, Google Ayurveda, they'll tell you what to. Do you know anything about these things?
Definitely. So as you were saying about Kapha or Vata, Pitta for generally when I'm suggesting to people, I would say, like you just said, stay away from caffeine. And you also said that once, I remember you saying that you would not have coffee after a certain time because these things ignite your system.
When I was in my 20s and 30s, if I drank coffee at 11 in the morning, I'd be up at night. But that doesn't happen now because I'm, there's something about, I can't, I think they say when you're a baby, you're in the Kapha state, and then there's a middle-aged state, and then when you're older, I don't know, but after I gained weight, I could drink some coffee without going crazy.
Probably a Kapha planet took over somewhere around the line. The dashas also matter. If you're going through a Saturn dasha, or what BPHS says is if you're going through a Mercury dasha, then you would find a lot of smells working, a lot of nervous energy working within you.
No doubt.
So the dasha
that you can absolutely see. As somebody comes to a moon or a Jupiter, they start gaining weight. They come to Saturn and Mercury, they lose weight.
Yeah.
I was praying when I got into Saturn dasha, it would make me lose weight, you know.
So I think that also makes a difference. And then if you can plot, say Mercury, if it is for you in the airy, one of the airy signs, then we know that this person is going to be a lot more airy than it actually should be. And then we can suggest accordingly. So this is a very
Yeah.
beautiful thing to explore for people.
It is. And when you're doing a reading, you know, it depends on the horoscope. Some horoscopes, when you're doing readings, you have a lot to say. Some you don't. So you look for things where, you know, oh, here's something I can tell them that's of use. That's of use because honestly, when I see somebody Pitta, I say, look, those things are just going to make it worse. So you want to, you know, that makes a difference. They write it down. Yes, I better start having more melons and this and that. Or the person who's kapha, if they have oily foods. My wife is kapha, and we bought it. And I do a lot of the cooking, and we used to have a gas stove. We had to get rid of it. We have a regular electric stove, which I don't like. And it's taking so long to get used to it. And I'm having to put more oil in the pan. And every so often she goes, I can't eat this. It's too oily. Now it's funny because you could put extra oil in. It wouldn't bother me at all. But for her, it's like it makes her, you know, lethargic and slow. And so Donald Trump,
Now
who's,
move on to Donald Trump. Yes.
well, I just want to mention Donald Trump has Mars 3 degrees Leo. The ascendant is 6 degrees Leo. He's always angry. He's always assertive. He's Pitta. His face is red. He's Pitta. He's fiery. That's Pitta.
Right.
He also, I would also say that, so he has a sun-moon opposition. Okay. This is a little bit hard to tell because the sun is the ascendant ruler, right? And it's getting an aspect from the moon, which would be kapha. But the moon itself is so important, and the moon is being aspected by the sun within 1 degree. So so the moon and the ascendant are getting very strong Pitta influences.
So yeah, and so that also makes his mind frame so very aggressive all the time. So very aggressive.
Yeah, typical. Yeah. Now, so if we look at Trump's chart, which I want to talk about just because of the Bhava charts. The Bhava charts are so important. So in the old system, if you look at Trump's chart, the ascendant is around 6 degrees. So in the older system, which I prefer the ancient system, all things being equal, but they're not always equal. What I mean by that is, in the ancient system, okay, 6 degree Leo and a planet in 28 Leo is in the first house. Now, in the newer system, the Bhava chart, they would say, let's use the ascendant degree as the middle of the sign. So 6 degrees is the middle. That means that from 21 Cancer to 21 Leo is the first house. Of course, the sun is still the ascendant ruler, but the first house. So if you had a planet in a late degree, 27, 28 Cancer, you're going to say, oh, that's in the first house. But there's a difference. When I say that I prefer the older system, what I mean by that is, let's say that the ascendant is 2 degrees of Leo, okay? And we're going 15 degrees on either side. 17 Cancer to 17 Leo would be the first house. So if a planet is a little bit outside of 17, maybe a planet's in 20 degrees, right? So now it goes to the second house. If I had a choice, I would put a little bit more emphasis on that being in the first, because I like the ancient system better. I find it more accurate. But if the ascendant's 2 degrees and Venus is 28 degrees, 27 degrees, it's going to have more influence on the next house. Either way, they're going to have both. They're going to have both. But the further it gets away from the ascendant, before or after, the more influence in the other house. But no matter what, you've got to do both. So let's say that we look at this one. So Donald Trump has the stationary Jupiter in the second house, so he's filthy rich, makes a lot of money, right? Donald Trump spent 14 years hosting a television show. That's the arts, that's the third house and the fifth house. So how's the third house? Lousy, really lousy. The third house ruler, Venus, is in the 12th, no good. 2 degrees away from Saturn, worse. Aspected by Ketu, worse again. There's nothing good about the third house ruler. But you take that stationary Jupiter and you see it's in 24 degrees. The ascendant is 6. So if you go 15 before 6 and 15 after 6, that means 21 Leo to 21 Cancer to 21 Leo, 21 Leo to 21 Virgo is the second. So now Jupiter has escaped the first house. In the Bhava chart, it's in the third. That's the arts, music, dance, drama. Then you take the moon. The moon is definitely, I would say, more of a fifth house influence than it is the fourth. Because the ascendant 6 degrees, the moon is 28. It's going to fall in both the fourth and the fifth. The same with Ketu. So those go to the fifth house, and that's going to be the arts again. It's going to be children. It's going to be investments, all of that. Now, if you look at, this is important. When you look at, say, the Sun and Rahu in 29 and 27 Taurus, and the ascendant is 6. So the Sun and Rahu, they're in the 10th house in the ancient system. And you could see that. He's a leader. This guy's gotten tremendous power. That's because of his 10th house. The 10th house is magnificent. The sun is there, aspected not just by the moon, but by a full moon, aspecting its exaltation sign Taurus. And it's aspected not just by Jupiter, but by stationary Jupiter. The station, in my opinion, aspects from planets are always pretty much the same. It doesn't matter if Jupiter is exalted, if Saturn's fallen, it's still throwing the same aspect. But when a planet is stationary, that's the one case. This is something that I talked about in the workshop and lecture. That's the one case where it's going to throw a stronger aspect because it's stationary. But here's the point. When you take the Sun and Rahu and you place them in the 11th, right? Because they're going to go from the 10th to the 11th. When you put them in the 11th, it's not just Sun Rahu going into the 11th. It's the Sun and Rahu aspected by the full moon in Taurus. It's exaltation sign. And it's the Sun and Rahu in the 11th aspected by Jupiter. The Rahu and Sun don't change signs. They stay in Taurus. They get the same aspects, but they fall into that 11th house. And I would say something similar, that if they were going into the 8th house or the 12th house, I would not attribute as much harm. There would be harm, but I wouldn't put as much emphasis if by signs they were still in the 9th or the 7th, but if they move over to the 8th or the 12th, but not by sign, just by the planets, I'm not going to call them extraordinarily afflicted. So in my case, I have a 2-degree ascendant of Taurus, and the sun is 29 degrees Virgo. So it falls in the 5th house, but you know what? It's 27 degrees past the ascendant degree. So it's also a 6th house sun. My life was so much about diets and self-improvement and healing techniques, the sun in the 6th. Now, I'm an extremely, I know it sounds funny because you see my performance nature, or so in childhood. My ascendant ruler is right.
Just a second, James. You need to come back again because we lost you somewhere in between.
Where? Go back.
About the sun. After the sun and the 6th.
Okay. So in my case, I have a 2-degree Taurus ascendant. The sun is 29 Virgo. So the sun is in the ancient system in the 5th house. But the sun is 29 degrees. The ascendant's 2 degrees. So it falls also in the 6th. My life has been so much about self-improvement and diets and healing techniques. All 6th house matters. My moon is in the 12th house. It's in Aries in the 12th, aspected by Mercury. But the moon is 23 degrees, and it's definitely a 12th house moon. I'm a shy, introverted person working on enlightenment my whole life. That's the 12th house. But the moon also, because it's 23 degrees Aries and the ascendant is 2 degrees, the moon also has a 1st house influence. And when I'm on a stage or giving a lecture or giving a video, I can easily bring forth that moon in the 1st house energy. So, but this is critical. So when I talk about the chai being a whole mixture, you know, after 20, to me, it takes about 20 years before you know what you're doing with astrology. And there came a point, I can't tell you exactly when this was, but it was at least 20 years. It was a point where I would look at the chart, and within the first 30, 40 seconds, I would be looking to see, is the ascendant degree early or late? You know, I look at the chart, I look at the 1st house, I look at the moon, I look to see, is there anything weird about the chart, conjunctions, etc. But even before that, I'm looking at the ascendant degree. Is it early or late? Because if it's early or late, then I have to look. If it's very early, then I have to see, does the person have any planets in late degrees? They're going to go for both houses. If the ascendant is very late, I'm looking for planets that are very early. They're going to go in the house before. But you've got to do it both ways.
That's a very beautiful session that we had with James, and especially when he said 2 beautiful things. First is he said that chai is not just components, different components, but it's a mixture. And Indians can very well relate to it because we are very finicky about our tea. The second thing he said was that we need 20 years of experience before we can finally nail things down in astrology. So these are the things we really do need to understand, work on, and know that it takes a lot to become a good astrologer, and we need to understand the nitty-gritty about it all. Thank you so much, James, for it.
And when you get to that 20-year point, there's also a point where you start to realize, oh my God, the mistakes that I've made, right? and then you have to do very good work in the next 20 years to make up for whatever mistakes you made, and you can bet that you will make mistakes, and you just have to, as you go on. Yeah.
Thank you so much, James, for the beautiful pearls. Thank you so very much. Till we meet you again, all of you, stay safe, be happy.